Hello and welcome to About Books. On this week's show we have an exclusive interview with author Jon Savage about his book 1966, a meticulously researched cultural tour de force of the music and seismic world events of one year that changed our culture. Later in the show we speak to former TV and radio journalist Mike Bodnar about his book Against the Current, Au revoir to corporate life and bonjour to a life afloat in France. But first tonight, Jon Savage. Jon Savage is a writer, broadcaster and music journalist, best known for his award-winning history book on the Sex Pistols and punk music, England's Dreaming. Tim Quinn recently spoke with him about his new book, 1966.
Hello. Jon Savage, hello.
Hello.
Hello, 1953.
1953.
Can
1953.
I take you back to 1966? What are your personal memories of the year? As a boy of 12, 13?
Yeah. My personal memories of the year were that the first 9 months of the year I was very happy. I did well at my final 2 terms at, school, at my local school in Ealing, West 5, which is where I lived. And I had a lot of personal freedom. I went to school every day on the tube, and obviously lived at home with my parents. And while I was busy studying for exams, which I did very well in, I got a scholarship to public school. I was also, my interior life was spent listening to pirate radio. In London, you could get Radio Caroline South, which was an American-style station, as opposed to the BBC, which still had the light programme then, and only had a couple of programmes on which you could hear pop music, and then it also had Top of Pops. But the Pirates had 24/7 music in an American-style format, and they play records that the BBC wouldn't. So I was listening to all these records, and it was like a world opening up. Like James Brown, I Got You, I Feel Good, and the associations, Along Comes Mary, as long as the obvious hits that you'd hear as well.
Can you give me an example of the freedom of an example of the music of that time?
Yeah, well, I mean, you listen to something like 7 and 7 Is by Love, which is an extraordinary record. It's one of the cornerstones in the book. I could cite about 100 that would be the same. But 7 and 7 Is in particular is an extraordinary record. It's very short. It's very fast. It's very. The lyrics are psychological. They're childhood memory. The performance is very angry. The guitars are very distorted. And it's done by a multiracial group from Los Angeles. So you've got lots of things going on at once. People crossing boundaries, doing new things, mixing everything together. Another example is Richard, I'll Be There by the Four Tops, where the writers, Lamont Dozier Holland, were influenced in the sound of the record and the phrasing, and the way that Levi Stubbs drags out some of the words. They were influenced by Bob Dylan. Now that wouldn't have happened 3 years before. So it's a time of crossover, of people experimenting. It's not only to do with the frenetic nature of music and the pop economy at that time, it's also to do with drugs. It's also to do with the onset of the drug culture, the psychedelic drug culture, with marijuana, in particular LSD, which is a major dissolving agent.
Can you describe the process of writing such a book? And where did you start? And did you have a route mapped out from the start? And did you deviate from that route?
It started with the music, because everything starts with the music. And in a way, you can't write a book like this unless you've really loved the music, you're a fan. And I am a fan. I love music, it's an intimate part of my life. And I really love a lot of the records I write about in the book. But then beyond the point, being a fan is not enough, because this is a history. It's not a personal experience book. I'm not talking about myself. The only time I talk about myself in the book is for one short paragraph. And because of the nature that things are, people have picked up on this, which is fine. It's a way to hook people into it. But actually the book is intended as a fairly serious work of social history and cultural history, using pop music as a hook into that, because pop music was a way that a lot of people interpreted the world, particularly people of our generation, i.e. people who were born in the late, say from 45 onwards to, I was born in 53, you were born in 53. Music, certainly, for a lot of us, was the way that we interpreted the world, and it seemed to contain enough information and content within it that you could interpret the world through it. It wasn't simply a question of moon and June, I love you, walk, talk, etc. Nothing wrong with that. But as it happens, there was a lot more in the music of that period. So having listened to the records and working out that I wanted to do the book anyway, I then decided to do, how do I do it so that it's not a definitive history, because that would be like encyclopedia, 12 months, one song a month, pick the tune, make it work. And really, it's a sort of, a piece of paper, the back of a piece of paper moment. And then I stayed fairly well close to that. There were a couple of awkward moments where I had to work out whether to treat something in June or July, but basically it was pretty straightforward. And then it was a question of deciding what the narratives are going to be, and then setting them out, establishing the narratives. And then what I did in the last third of the book was to toss them all in the air and to run them simultaneously.
1966 is as much a part of history as 1066 now, all these years on. How does it relate to 2016? Does it relate to?
Well, some of the records still sound very timeless because they were made at the peak of popular music as a mass art form, and they are imperishable. And I think a lot of the spirit in those records is imperishable. As I said, that sound of freedom. I think people are perfectly happy in 2016 to read a good historical book about pop culture. I don't think there are enough, actually. And one that celebrates pop culture, as opposed to even rock culture. And this is a book about pop culture. It's a book about hit singles in a lot of cases. So, although I do write about some obscure records, I do write about hits like 90th Nervous Breakdown or Good Vibrations or Winchester Cathedral. They're all big, big pop hits. And it's a feature of 66 that the avant-garde could also be pop, which is a hell of a lesson. And I always hope my book, same with the punk book, England's Dreaming, is that young people can read this and take inspiration and use what is related in the book as a kind of template. And that certainly happened with England's Dreaming. It's like, how do you set up a rebellious pop group? Here's how you do it, and go for it. And I'm always a great believer in the spirit of, in particular, late adolescence, to be able to see what the future could be and to start acting on that vision.
If you had to pull out 3 standout points of 66, maybe a book, a record, a movie, or was there something else outside of it?
Well, the first one would be 7 and 7, which is just incredible. Yeah, the Love single. Well, as we're in Liverpool, it would have to be Beatles. It would be Paperback Writer. I have a very strong memory of that song, of being on the Underground, on the way to my maths coach in Pinner, with my little red transistor listening to Paperback Writer and loving it. So it would have to be the Beatles, and the Beatles had an extraordinary year in 66. They had 3 months off at the start of the year, and then they made Revolver and Paperback Writer, which is standalone singles, both of which are fantastic, probably their peak in some ways. And then also they had all the trouble with the Butcher cover, the Robert Whittaker photo of the babies in raw meat, and then which was the cover of American Album Yesterday and Today, which was banned. And in the book there's a description of how Capitol had to pulp 75,000 of these covers, and it cost them $200,000 in 1966. It was a lot of money. So it'd be millions now. And obviously then they had the trouble with the more popular than Jesus comment and the terrible American tour, and then they disappear. And then right at the end of the year they're making a Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields, which are going to turn pop into another new direction, and also are, if you like, an LSD, because one of the things that LSD did was take you back to a childhood state and also unlock childhood memories and even childhood traumas. And so, apart from When I'm 64, the first 2 tracks the Beatles recorded right at the end of 66 were records about going back to childhood, their childhood Liverpool, in fact. And it would have been fantastic if they'd done a whole album like that. The third one, let me think. It's going to have to be very random. Let's go for the film Morgan, A Suitable Case for Treatment, which is a wonderful film, and stars David Warner as an artist in swinging London who's going mad. And it's written by David Mercer, who's a very well-known radical playwright in the 60s, and it's directed by Carl Rice. And it's just, again, it's all about this idea of the pace, the madness of the 60s. And everybody tends to think that the 60s was this wonderful golden age, and everybody was like Austin Powers going down, the King's Road on E-Type, listening to 3 CD 60s hits, Somewhere in the City, followed by Sunday Afternoon, etc., etc. It wasn't like that. So it would be that. But those are very random. I could do 100 more.
You mentioned that you didn't want to write a book about 65 or 67. Having written 66, is the inclination to carry on into 67? What's next for Jon Savage?
What's next for Jon Savage is not writing a book. I've been stuck in a room for a year, and I want not to be stuck in a room for a year. I should probably start thinking about what book I want to write towards the end of this year, and it would be an intuitive process informed by my publishers and various close friends.
Jon, delight to talk to you.
Thank you.
And a wonderful, wonderful book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Bodnar is a former radio and TV presenter. He's been a journalist, a stand-up comedian, and has made many documentaries interviewing notable performers such as Rowan Atkinson and Spike Milligan. Living in New Zealand for 40 years, he returned to the UK recently, and we spoke to him about his new book. Hello and welcome to About Books. I'm here with Mike Bodnar, who has written a book called Against the Current, Au revoir to Corporate Life and Bonjour to a Life Afloat in France, which tells the stories of his adventures during a kind of a gap year that you and your wife decided to take. Is that fair enough to say?
That's exactly right, Mary. It was a gap year, slightly later in life than you normally take one.
Nothing wrong with that. And that was 2013, wasn't it?
Yes, it spanned 2013 into 2014 for almost exactly a year.
You gave up your job, sold your house, and went to live in France for the year.
Yes, well, we were both born in England and both ended up living in New Zealand. And I'd been there for over 40 years, Liz, my wife, for over 25. And we both had a hankering to come back to the Northern Hemisphere.
Okay, yeah.
And so we decided we would, but not just in any temporary way that we'd bite the bullet and come back wholesale, but instead of getting a direct flight from Auckland to Heathrow, we took a 12-month detour through the inland waterways of France, bought a boat and sailed on them for a year.
Have you still got the boat?
Still got the boat.
Oh, and what's she called?
Liberty.
Why are they always girls?
Appropriately. Do you think Liberty is a girl's
Yes,
name, is it?
I do.
Okay.
I've decided it is.
I never really thought of her as a her or a he. It was an it. The boat was
Don't
just
like that,
always an it.
Mike.
I know. But because it wasn't an overtly female name, like Mary, for example.
It's a great name.
Yes. And so, no, it was just the boat most of the time.
Boat.
Sometimes it was the boat when it was
really?
going wrong.
Because, yeah,
most of the time. It was the boat.
I like the fact that although it starts, and the front cover, which is gorgeous, is paradisical, isn't it? The idea of escaping from everything and finding freedom. But there are some difficult moments, aren't there? There are some challenges that you overcome.
Yes, quite a few. I mean, the first challenge was finding the right boat, and with the best will in the world, we couldn't.
Why not? Tell
Because
us why, for someone who's not ready yet.
No, that's fine. Because we had done some research online from New Zealand before we actually set off for France, looking at what boats were available. And we had in our minds something that was older, something full of character, something that had colour, nicely shaped prow.
Geraniums on the sills.
Geraniums, exactly,
Yeah.
A dog waiting for us on the stern, something like that. And when we got there and looked at those boats that we'd identified, they were in a dreadful condition. I mean,
Really?
well, from a photograph you can't always tell.
Right.
They looked good online.
Just
when
like
you
online
saw them
dating.
close up, and when you opened the door and smelt the inside and the dampness, and and then you find things that like rust and rot, and So we had to, that was the first challenge, up our budget, basically double it to find what we wanted. We wanted something you could turn the key on and take off.
You already knew how to sail, I assume.
No, and that's part of the other challenge. The biggest one was that we had never owned a boat together like that. We never lived in a confined space for a
You
year.
two are bonkers, basically,
Completely.
is that right?
Absolutely.
And also the language thing, I mean, I assume you spoke a bit of French.
Yes, we both spoke a bit of French. I spoke it slightly better than Liz, only just, but Liz understood it a lot better than I did. So as long as we were out together, it was fine. Separate us, and the poor French.
Did you take lessons before you left in sailing, or just turn the key and hope for the best?
No, we just boned up using books and online a little bit. But it increases your confidence when you're living in the country, and you have to speak the French.
Yeah.
And the other challenges were actually then the being unqualified and inexperienced, not sinking the boat, not crashing it into things, not losing it in some way, not setting fire to it, you know, all of which we came very close to doing. True.
The setting fire part.
Yes,
Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, okay, and this was even before we'd set sail. We had some friends from New Zealand come and visit. They were touring Europe. And the gas alarm kept going off in the boat while they were staying with us. We hadn't even left. We'd only owned the boat for a week. And the gas alarm kept going off and we couldn't find anything wrong. It turned out 2 of the batteries down below were leaking hydrogen sulfide, which is
Not good.
volatile.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that if you spark, it can explode. So we came close. It wasn't, you know, we only found out after they left. They came that close to dying.
Goodness.
But it sounds.
You told them, you have now.
We have now. It's all in the book.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we all lived to tell the tale in the end.
So you did make sure you had enough room for guests.
Yes.
So part of going away wasn't to get away from everyone else, because what you say here is that you abandon your family and friends, but it doesn't feel quite like that when you read the book, does it?
No, but if you talk to our children, they'll probably say, yeah, they were abandoned and we were mean and selfish to go off. But let's face it, if you always take into account reasons for not doing something, you'll never do it. You know,
true.
the old saying is, if you always do what you've always done, then you always get what you always got.
Yeah.
So we did want to go against the current, which is partly where the title comes from, against current thinking. Current thinking is, you're in good jobs, you own a home, you're in an established lifestyle, stick with it. Don't,
Keep your heads down.
yeah, don't threaten it, don't do anything to upset it, don't rock the boat, as it were.
Really?
But so we did go against current thinking.
Yeah.
The other place where the title came from is we were going under a bridge on the Canal du Midi, and we saw this graffiti. It was a modern bridge. The old ones are safe from graffiti. It's only the new ones, the modern ones, that get tagged. And the
Why is that?
I think because the sheer spread of basic concrete allows a canvas to spray on, whereas old brick doesn't. It's that simple, I think. I hope. Anyway, the saying in French was "Seuls les poissons morts suivent le courant. Êtes-vous un poisson mort?" Basically, it means it's asking, it's saying, only the dead fish follow the current. Are you a dead fish? Which apparently in France is a famous philosophical saying. But we loved it because we were going against the current. We didn't want to be dead fish, didn't want to go with the current.
So what did you learn about life and about yourselves that you wouldn't have learned if you hadn't given everything ostensibly up to take this new challenge on?
Good question. The thing I think we learnt the most was that it was worth doing. That we...
So you don't regret it? No regrets at all?
No regrets at all. We could live together in close confinement in a steel box that was 11.5 metres long by almost less than 4 metres wide for a year without coming to blows or getting divorced by the end of it.
That wouldn't even fit my wardrobe, I've got to tell you. Hats off to you, why?
Yes, well, we did have to confine ourselves, you know, and actually there's something cathartic about moving and selling your house and moving halfway across the world where you have to dispose of clutter.
Yeah.
So living without clutter was good. And deliberately, of course, you can't have too much on your boat. You can't have any more clutter to add to it.
Are boats vulnerable to burglary like tents are?
Yes, they are. Yeah. But I have to say, touch wood, that didn't happen at all. And we always felt a little bit touchy about leaving the boat for any period while we were away, and when we came back to find that it was still okay was a relief. But boat boating communities. That's one of the things we learned.
I was going to ask about that, because
How
by and large
lovely.
people are quite loving, kind, accepting. You have one or two interesting moments with people, but that seems to be a galvanising thing, actually. It seems
Yeah.
to make you think about how wrong they were in some cases later on.
In every respect, all the boating people we met were lovely. And one of the very interesting things about them is that they're only interested in you and your boat, not in what you do for a living. Never were we asked the question, and what do you do?
So it's a great leveller, is it?
Yeah. Everybody just is concerned. It didn't matter how wealthy people were on their boat and how gorgeous it was that it had remote control gangplanks and radar. That didn't matter. Whether you were then living on an ex-Thames workboat made of mahogany that had seen better days,
That one sounds
didn't
nicer.
matter. That was exactly the sort of boat that we wanted to buy, but it just wasn't available at the time. We met a couple who lived on one of those, and I'm still seething with jealousy.
Experienced boat envy.
Absolutely, but they were living on it full time. When we met them, they'd been on there 5 years. They've been on there 7 years now.
Wow. And so you've kept the boat, but you've changed your lifestyle and you're here permanently now?
Yeah, the sad part of it was that we had to go back to work in the end. The whole year was financed by having liquidated
Your children's
ourselves.
inheritance.
Yes, the children's inheritance is gone. And so, you know, in the end, we had to evaluate, what do we do now? And also, I did actually want to write the book about it.
Yeah.
I wanted to share
Could you have written on the boat?
I blogged.
Okay, so is that how it came about, really? You blogged
Yes.
for a while and
Yes.
took notes and that kind of stuff.
I was getting
Yeah.
good feedback about the blogs from the people who were following it. And after finishing the journey, I had 90,000 words of blogs already. I mean, the book's about 125,000, and it's more the fleshed out full story than the blogs were more of a day-to-day diary or week-to-week diary type.
Do you think you'd have written the book without the blogging?
It would have been a lot harder, and there's certainly a possibility it would never have got to print.
That's ace, because people can be quite down on blogging, but I think it's a really important medium.
Yeah. And I've subsequently met other people who have turned blogs into books, and some lucky ones have even, while they've been blogging, have been approached by publishers saying, would you like to turn this into a book? Yeah, I wish that had happened. But I had to self-publish in the end. I didn't have to, but I chose to.
It's a gorgeous, gorgeous self-publication. I could not tell. And I'm good with that.
Well, you're not supposed to.
I couldn't tell. It's really something.
I wanted a publishing company who could produce a good product, not something that fell apart in your hands.
It's Matador book?
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah, it's great. Really, really beautiful. So what one thing did you learn about yourself that you didn't know before?
Ooh.
You're only allowed one.
Only one thing. That I can write a book. Is that cheating? No, something else. It has to be something else, does it? Oh dear, I wish I'd known that question before it came. What else did I learn about myself?
Live TV, folks.
That I think that. Oh, okay. Look, that I love France more than I ever knew I would.
That actually does come across.
I could
as
live
well.
there tomorrow.
Well, thank you, Mike, for coming in and talking to us about your book, Against the Current, which is out now. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this edition of About Books, and we will see you soon.